Okay, so we are going to go ahead and get started here. For those that are curious or have to drop off early, this will be recorded and should be, I believe, sent out by both the Zoom function that you'll see probably tomorrow, but also through the event we'll have it as well. So hopefully everyone can see my screen and the reason that you're here. And I think you guys have all been joining some virtual trainings all week, so thank you for joining us in what is technically the 21st Annual SADBOC Government Procurement Fair. And if you're not familiar with SADBOC, it is the Small and Disadvantaged Business Opportunities Council, which is overseen by the Federal Executive Board. Its members are represented by federal, state, and local government agencies and other community partners. So we hope that you've been able to participate in many of the other webinars throughout the week. If you have questions about any of these sessions or need further assistance, please reach out to Sean and Christina with Minnesota PTAC and SBA. You can see their names there. I'll have this slide up at the end as well. So a little bit about me. My name is Derek White. I'm an equity partner and director of business development at Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative, located right here in the Twin Cities. Beryllium is a cybersecurity and information security company. We spend a lot of time working within the defense industrial base, specifically with small businesses that are DoD contractors. So thanks for joining. With me today, I have John Weiler from the CMMC Accreditation Body Board of Directors. Mr. Weiler has a very robust background, so I'm going to keep this brief. He is a recognized IT management leader with 4 decades of senior IT experience in commercial and defense positions. John has also guided major IT projects with nearly half of the federal agencies and been instrumental in the drafting of FITARA and several NDAA legislative directives. He has been leading champion of federal IT cyber reforms and managing director and CIO at the Interoperability Clearinghouse, a DoD chartered nonprofit research institute, and co-founder of the IT Acquisition Advisory Council, a public-private, quote-unquote, do tank dedicated to effecting the transformation of federal IT management, acquisition, and government. So thank you, John, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we get into some Q&A with John, because his perspective and information is going to be very informal and very important to those listening today, I'm going to just kind of recap and introduce the CMMC from a very high level. You know, there's a lot of people that are still in the early stages of learning and understanding what the CMMC is. So we're not going to dive into everything and all about the CMMC during this hour. This is very much an introductory and get people on the right path of understanding of what it is and where things are going. So with that is, you know, what is it? The Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification is a model which measures cybersecurity maturity based on the type and sensitivity of information needing to be protected. So there's, you know, approximately 300,000 suppliers in the DoD supply chain, and not all of them obviously handle the same type of sensitive data. So, you know, therefore they don't need to have the same level of protection and requirements around that data. You know, that's an important part of this, because if you're a tier 1 supplier and you're a large business with resources, you have different needs, and we'll get to that in a little bit, different requirements, and it's not practical to have those same requirements all the way down the supply chain. And I forgot to mention as well, if you have questions, please submit them through the chat function, and we'll compile those for John at the end here too. So what the difference between the CMMC and how the previous world of cybersecurity requirements for DoD contracting is that certification means verification. So the verification process in maturing the DoD supply chain from a cyber defense standpoint needs to be moving forward. And the only way to get that done is to have some sort of verification and validation that our subcontractors and prime contractors are doing what's necessary to stop threats from coming our way. And that's what the CMMC, excuse me, is representing at the core. So why we need it is there's multiple reasons, really, why you think about a certification process in this technology age of cybersecurity and information security. Well, one of the more important things is there's $600 billion of intellectual property being stolen from the United States every year. So 600 billion with a B, and that number is going to continue to grow if we don't do something about it. And that's why we've seen a bigger enhancement and more directiveness around cyber requirements to protect this information of the DoD. And the big part of this is that threats evolve. Technology is advancing, threats are going to evolve, attacks are going to get better and stronger, more sophisticated, and we have to too. When I say we, we're talking about national security. This is between you, me, everybody on this call, as well as small businesses up to large businesses. We have to stay true to evolving with threats. Otherwise, we're going to lose that competitive advantage and our innovation that all of us small businesses that are participating in these sessions this week have. So when it comes to the CMMC, I've taken some screenshots here. I've sourced the link here. This is from the CMMC model that is public on the Acquisition and Sustainment Office of the Secretary of Defense website. Provide all that at the end. But really just to kind of highlight what we're talking about here when we talk about a maturity model. When you hear the CMMC, what that means. Main things to know, it is a 5-level security maturity process. So level 1 is going to be on the basic side. And you can see as you get further up the path and further up the levels, things get a little bit more serious. And that's exactly how it should be. So within the whole entire 300,000 suppliers in the supply chain, everyone's going to have to be certified at a certain level. Well, that a majority of people are going to be at the basic level of cyber hygiene. Why is that? Well, we don't even have a good number of these small and suppliers that have this information that's not going to take down an airplane or sink a ship or really be super impactful to our national security. They have basic data, federal contract information and things like that. Doesn't mean it needs to be out in the public. They're going to have to do some basic security controls around it. And you can see the terminology used as you go forward. It goes from basic and performed up to documenting some things and becoming a little bit more mature. And then you get up into manage. So now you're managing your cybersecurity. You have good cyber hygiene. That's where they want a lot of, the DoD wants a lot of our suppliers to be good, right? That's going to stop a lot of threats. And then you can see as you get higher and higher, the threats are going to be more advanced. Therefore, the security has to be more advanced as well. Different way to look at the levels here. This is again another slide from which is public information. Is as you kind of see that sliding scale on the bottom, that's kind of the maturity sliding scale, if you will. So think about you're over here on the left, your basic information, basic controls, things that for the most part are free, passwords and who needs access to what and all that kind of just stuff that you should be doing anyway, you know, and then you slide that forward. So now you're transitioning your way to becoming a more mature supplier of the DoD supply chain, but specifically around the data that you handle. You're not going to be required to have more security around your information if it doesn't require that level of protection. So you can see that, and that's, I think this is well laid out. As you can just kind of see it going right, you're going to have to climb those levels. And you'll see that in your contract information and the RFPs when they start coming out. I'll let John talk about that here in a little bit. But really, you know, from a blood pressure standpoint, you know, this isn't starting tomorrow, but this is a really serious thing, and we need to make sure that we're aware of what's going on and where you sit within the supply chain, knowing your business so that you can protect it from all sorts of risk management, not just cyber, but everything else. So this is kind of your levels of moving forward, and we'll get, again, more details on that later. So a lot of questions that come up are, okay, well, what does that mean? I'm new to this, I'm new to the DoD, or I haven't put a lot of focus on my cybersecurity, so what does it mean? Well, here you're looking at the 17 domains, and just think of these as categories that are going to fall within these requirements. And you can see through some of these, there's going to be technical ones, right? It's technology age. You're going to have things and tools in place and information stored in certain places. But not all of these have to do with technology. I mean, there's things about situational awareness, training your employees to keep away from attacks that might take down your business from a ransomware attack or take your data away. And now what are you going to do? Now we're into how are you going to respond to that? Did you have recovery in place so that you can rebound from something that might happen that's not good? And physical security around your documentation that's laying on the desk here, and policy and procedure. There's so much that goes into this, and it doesn't have to be overly robust at that point, but you really have to be able to take, I've got this stuff in place, I'm documenting that I'm doing it this way, and I'm following the requirements. Okay, so these 17 domains here are pulled from multiple frameworks, some very key frameworks. That's a good thing, because that means that the CMMC has devised a model that takes best practice from different frameworks. Okay, so that's important. We won't go down the rabbit hole on that right now, but just know this is a information security program at the end of the day, and how that's handled, stored, and accessed for your organization. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this screen. I just want to show this one. I like to highlight a couple things here that if you take those 17 domains and put them top to bottom, you can kind of see the weight. I don't want to use weighted as like it's a weighted scale, but you can kind of see the importance on a couple of these and where you're going to be spending a lot of your time and what really becomes a good mature security program, starting with access control. So access control is as simple as less people touching information that you don't want people to have outside of your organization, the easier it is to control. So you have to start identifying where does our sensitive information reside, our intellectual property, our innovation, controlled and classified information, so CUI if you're handling that for the DoD. But if you can think of an analogy like war movies, old war movies, you got the generals sitting in the tent looking at a map, 5 or 6 people talking about what they're going to do. It's a lot easier to protect the information when there's only 5 people that know it versus 500 people that know it, right? So it's access control is going to be a big piece of this, along with system and communications protection. So your system and your technology and how that's going to be built out. And you'll see some other ones within there as well. More on this, you can find lots of resources, information on this later, and John, you can talk about this in a few minutes, but just highlighting the fact that this is laid out in a digestible format so that small businesses and medium and large businesses are able to identify what they need to put their focus on. So a couple things that those are in attendance here, kind of what have we seen? I've heard about some of this. So the question is, how many people have seen these two things? This is something that's in a lot of contracts if you're doing work with the Department of Defense, because it is a current standard and requirement that's been around for a couple of years now. In fact, it was supposed to be done over 2 years ago. Okay, so the DFARS 252.204-7012 is a current requirement for those that handle controlled unclassified information within the DoD supply chain. And if you have that information, and this clause is in your contract, it says that you must put into place NIST Special Publication 800-171, which is 110 controls put out by NIST. They can't tell you to do it. This is their information, their standard around how to protect this information. I'm using the NIST 800-171 as an example of a standard that is within the CMMC because it really is the core of this whole thing, and it's a good security program. When fully in place, NIST 800-171 is a great way to secure information so the bad guys don't get it. Okay, so this is kind of where you want to get your mindset. If you're not familiar with these two things and you don't see them in your contract, that's okay. You should always be having communication with who you're doing business with in the DoD. But if you have seen these and you don't have a lot of this done, then we have to start putting our focus on getting the requirements in place, because that'll help you adapt to CMMC requirements as they come out. So what I'd like everybody to do now, if you have a piece of paper, is write this website down. This is the cmmcab.org. This is the website for the CMMC accreditation body, which I'll have John explain a little bit more, but just to kind of give a real quick on what this represents, is the DoD put out a need for a third-party body full of punch people like John who are volunteers. It's a nonprofit. It is this separate body that is going to help with resources around training third-party auditors, which don't exist yet. But when those do, how are we going to train them? How are they going to do the assessments? You know, keeping them accountable. What's going to happen if I don't pass my assessment? All of those things that we want a third body or third party, the body like the AV, to be in charge of, right? People who have robust backgrounds, different perspectives, working together to make the CMMC the best model and program available. So,
Derek, if I
right,
might
this
add,
website.
we're
Yeah,
going to go
please do.
beyond just certifying the auditors. We're setting up training programs for individuals who want to have, CMMC next to their name because they've gone through a training program to make them aware and experts in the CMMC standard.
Right. Yep. And thank you, because that's one of the questions I can see already came in. So yes, exactly. So from a high level, John, you can talk more about what the CMMC is here in a second, but I just want everybody to make sure that this is one of the top resources that you should be going to familiarize yourself with CMMC updates and information, because if it's on this website, it's public information and it's accurate. So make sure you're not essentially going to places where the information is not accurate and you're worrying about things you shouldn't be. John and his whole team on the board is very focused on making sure that accurate, straightforward information is released. So go to that. I'll provide some other resources as well at the end, but specifically the cmmcab.org website. So with that, that's enough for me. Just a little bit of highlight in CMMC. We're going to spend a good chunk of this time going through questions and answers. I've got a couple for John specifically, and I'll work in everybody else's questions that are coming in. I see a good number of them already. So, and it looks like, John, you might be answering some of those as well.
If you don't mind, on
Yeah,
where
please do.
The organization got formed over a year ago following an RFI put out by OSD ANS. ANS is formerly known as ATNL, headed up by Ellen Lord. Katie Arrington came in as the PM for this initiative, and Congress has made this a mandatory part of the DFARS execution moving forward. So what the RFI process produced was about 100 responses of organizations who touch cybersecurity and were interested in becoming that body. The problem is they couldn't pick any one, because if you pick one, everyone else would protest. So they found that it would be necessary to create a new 501c3 that could partner with and work with and be the independent auditor to execute on the CMMC standard and roll it out. So we are now taking the standard that was developed in partnership with DoD, and that included Carnegie Mellon and Johns Hopkins, doing the research and looking at NIST 171 and NIST-53 and saying, okay, what are the enhancements necessary to these existing standards that would deal with the highest, high levels of security required for, weapon systems acquisition and management. So a voluntary board came together. We filed in the state of Maryland our credentials to be a 501c3, and we have executed a memorandum of understanding that establishes us the exclusive authoritative body to execute on this. And the execution will happen through a number of third parties, not only what we call 3PAO, third-party auditors, but also those who want to do pre-assessments and quality assurance as well. So our intent is to make sure any Bubba out there selling CMMC services has been authorized by us, carries our brand, and we will be putting together a website listing those companies so that you know who can you trust, who can you work with.
Right. Awesome. No, that's great. I was just going to say, if you wanted to provide some more detail around, your role and stuff with the CMMC AB board. That's great. That's a great
Yes,
a great way to kind of tie that up. Yep.
so I am.
I do have a yeah. Go ahead.
I'm one of 15 members of the board. Originally, there were only 7. I was part of the original 7. And we decided that we need a little bit more robust representation. So we put out a solicitation inviting others to come in so that we had a diverse representation of the community. Frankly, small businesses are greater represented in the EAB than other types of entities. Now, I represent a couple nonprofits, but most of my colleagues come from small businesses. We have a representative from Accenture and Microsoft, so they're kind of on the other side of the equation, but they have great credentials and they're a great addition to the team. And my responsibilities, I have several hats in the organization. One is the co-chair of the standards body, the standards committee, and the standards committee takes and looks at, how well are we implementing, not the what, but the how, to execute the intent of these standards established by NIST, established by DoD. And the other hat that I wear is the chair of a new group called Strategic Relations Group, the SRG, which will be establishing these formal alliances with organizations who will help us execute in the terms of training, awareness, conferences, 3PAOs and auditors, et cetera. So we're looking to build out existing communities, existing nonprofits who service our industry and who have representation in the market like AIA and NDIA and Professional Services Council and CompTIA. So, these are, many of these organizations responded to the RFI, but because their work was too narrow relatively to the large expanse of the defense industrial base, it was best to stand up an independent organization. Thank you.
Right. Right. Well, that's a good transition into one of the questions that, and I have a couple here, which I think will be very representative of our audience today, and some concerns and questions they might have too. So around the 300,000 DIB companies, and this being a new standard, can you elaborate a little bit more on how the CMMC AB will train and equip those 300,000 suppliers to succeed with this?
Yeah, we have already begun rolling that out with some alliances, not necessarily partnerships at this time, who work in the space. AFCEA, we have worked with them on putting together an educational program. And we had an online program, I think, with 1,400 attendees at once. We also did another one with an organization called Dreamport. They're part of the Maryland Institute of Science and I don't know, I can't remember what it stands, MISSI stands for. But it's a state sponsored nonprofit. And they put on a webinar as well. We had 4,000 attendees and the system did not like all those and it ended up crashing. So we're kind of having to reboot that idea. The other way we're going to go out is we'll end up licensing the training material that we have developed, building out the work that has been handed to us by DoD to begin to train it for levels 1 and 2 in one training program, and then 3, 4, and 5 in another enhanced program. And we expect to be delivering that through third parties. We're not going to be doing this ourselves because we just don't have the resources to reach 300,000 organizations. NASA has also asked to join in the rollout. They have 700,000 contractors under their SOUP contract, and they have offered to be a conduit for delivering that training to their community, those who want to be more secure and understand the emerging threats facing us all. And those threats are compounded with COVID because we're now working in unsecured home offices. And we have seen an uptick in cyber attacks coming from an Asian country that's very big and not so nice to us. So we're seeing a big uptick.
Yeah. Well,
a big uptick.
Well said. Well said. Yeah, that's when we talk about, we obviously didn't get into a ton of this during the just kind of the high level view of CMMC, but there's different types of enemies, right? There's adversaries from other countries that want our information that they can we have the best country in the world. They want to take our information, and then that's not good for anybody, specifically, taxpayers and businesses and stuff. But really, there's intellectual property at play here too by competitors and other people looking to get that advantage. So, this really comes down to a risk management play more than anything, and cyber risk is one risk. And I think the CMMC is really shaping up to be something that will solve a lot of those problems. I want to point out real quick to those in attendance.
To that point, Derek, we have already determined that the Chinese stole our detailed engineering plans for the F-35 and have already designed and built an F-35 very similar to ours without paying the tens of billions of dollars invested in R&D.
Right. Yep.
I mean,
there's other examples
stolen like this. It's good.
Right.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. Yep. No, that's when there's other examples too of subcontractors that have lost big chunks of their data. Which again, if that's the one thing to understand here is that although the information that me as a small business, Derek White Inc. might handle might not seem that important in some people's eyes, if you compile that with John's information and the 60-some people that are listening right now's information and pile it all together, it becomes pretty sensitive information and a lot of information that people want. So yeah. Yeah. So, everybody that's attending, please. I know there's two ways. There's a Q&A function. I highly recommend that you submit questions to there. That helps for us afterwards in case there's some questions we don't get to. Rather than using the chat function, which I know, John, you've been very good about putting some information on there as well. So thank you. But please submit questions here. We can have John answer them to the best of his ability if it's obviously information that's available. Otherwise, we'll keep going with a couple more questions that have come in. Recently, I want to say within the last couple of days, it came out that the COTS vendors, commercial off-the-shelf vendors, are exempt. Is this true? And kind of what's the update on that? I know that's a fun one for you.
Yeah, this is something that causes all of us our hair to catch on fire because we call it a red herring. And the reason this is kind of a hot topic is the question that was proposed to Katie is that, we're talking about chickens and rubber bands. And, that is a commercial item. So it was presented under that context. But those who live and breathe defense IT, COTS means software vendors like Amazon, Oracle, HP, et cetera, selling high-tech equipment. That is not the case. A chicken is not the same as a computer, and it carries a lot more concerns and issues. So if you are a supplier of commercial off the shelf, yes, that is part of the supply chain, and you will need to go through some level of certification to make sure not only is that code that you're providing and the sources of that code and hardware are relatively organic or from our allies. We just need to make sure also as you deliver that capability, you will then may be involved in installing that on computer networks owned by the government. So that statement that COTS vendors don't have to do this it's wrong for the most part because the defense industrial base is not focused on people delivering chickens and rubber bands.
Right. Yeah, I think it was good for them personally just to have some more clarification around that because I think as you know, and maybe some people don't know, that the initial information kind of released and understanding was that if you do work with the DoD, doesn't matter what you do, minimum level 1, which is basic stuff, but a level 1 certification will be in place. And to your point, I think that's exactly well said. That's the right way to say it, is that you'll know what your certification has to be when that time comes, right? And just because you feel it's commercial off the shelf, then it doesn't necessarily make you exempt. But more information on that, I assume, will be more clear. And it sounds like there is more information coming to clear up some of this. What kind of data do I handle and where do I need to fall? And that's important. Of course, our stance is always going to be, if you don't have even the basic 17 requirements in place and you're doing work kind of with anybody these days, specifically the DoD, it would be well advised to get those done because that's going to stop some pretty simple but very common attacks as well. Okay, so a couple questions here coming in. I don't know if some of these can technically be answered yet, but we'll give it a shot here. So yeah, this has been a popular question in the last week or so. What is the RFP you released and the explanation on your website all about?
All right, so this came about because of discussions with the DoD and other stakeholders that the certification lasts 3 years. So when you get your CMMC level 3, you're good for 3 years. But how do we make sure that over the next 3 years, something doesn't occur to change your security profile? Did your company get bought by the Chinese? Did you change out your computer system? Have you failed to upgrade your system because of patches that or flaws in software were not installed? So we're looking at an opportunity to automate some of that monitoring process to make sure, especially at levels 3, 4, and 5, that as threats change and as environments change and organizations change, that a new vulnerability or a threat vector has not been exposed due to those changes. So we have received 50 responses thereabout. We're a little bit overwhelmed by the number. We don't have paid people to help prepare all these materials, so we're doing it organically, so it may not be as pretty as we'd like, but it's important to find out what's out there so that we respond to our sponsors about the likelihood and possibility of using these kinds of tools. Now, funding for these tools is not entirely clear how that would be funded. There are certain circumstances, because we're a 501c3, what IRS allows is those contributions to a nonprofit of that standing is fully tax deductible off your top line. So those are other things to consider by those who are interested in supporting our organization and gain possibly even some moral hegemony versus funding and making access to those tools and techniques.
Awesome. Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. So kind of transitioning a little bit here to kind of some of the stuff you're saying. This question's a good question. We talked a little bit about this kind of in the high level side, but when it comes to CMMC levels needed, an organization that looks like an organization that wants to potentially handle or does handle CUI, what level are they looking at then for a certification process?
Possibly level 3. We're seeing 1 and 2 as very nominal, not really handling CUI data. So we're anticipating, and it depends on the specific contract, because that's a hard question to answer unless you have a context of what kind of system, what level of data is being handled. But the Pentagon will be identifying a handful of contracts that will initially require CMMC certification. And when they do this, it's going to begin at level 3. And for the most sensitive programs. So at this time, we only see about 1,500 contractors between now and the end of the year requiring a higher level of certification to be able to bid on these very sensitive OSD contracts. So I'm sorry if it's not a great answer at this time. We're working out the details of this as we speak, and if you go to the websites and keep tracking this, we'll continue to respond to those issues. But look at the charts. You can see the information. It's pretty clear. And make your own determination. We can continue to submit questions through the AB. So register on that website so that you can have access to Q&A and continued information as we evolve. But there are some things that are not as clear to everyone as they need to be, and we're not going to be releasing information unless we have full concurrence with our DoD sponsors.
Got it. Cool. Thank you. So here's a question. I've seen a couple of these kind of come in, but I think it plays into what you were just kind of touching on there. So, in the awareness of small businesses who operate with small margins and lack of resources, we hear a lot of feedback ourselves at Beryllium, but I know this is very common across the marketplace, is the comments that Katie and team have made about, Katie Arrington and team have made about leveling the playing field a little bit. There's a lot of people that put hard work into their contracts, hard work into meeting requirements, and talking, maybe if you want to talk a little bit about kind of how the DFARS rules currently stand up and the requirements there on this kind of trust model versus now a verification model, and how small businesses can either gain that advantage or position themselves to really compete here without kind of this, yeah, we've got it mentality.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What we're going to see, and again, the reason why CMMC was launched is because the proper self-certification under the DFARS requirement implementing 171 was not done. And this is some very big contractors were breached within that DFAR, including the entire architecture and design of the Joint Strike Fighter that the Chinese now have. That's not the only situation where we have found critical IP in the hands of the Chinese. And when investigating the contractor, we found that he did not, he self-certified, but not actually do the work to the fullest extent as he should have. Now, what's going to happen as we move forward is prime contractors are going to be required also to monitor their subs and looking to who they can bring on board. So small businesses and medium businesses that want to get a quick leg up should really try to get in on level 1 and 2 right away so you can get in the registry. And that will provide for the contractors identification of organizations who they can partner with and bring on and meet the requirements being put in these big giant contracts. So I think it's a wonderful opportunity. I don't think it's going to be that difficult or expensive to get through level 1 and 2. My nonprofit's going to go through that process as well. I'll get trained, we'll get certified. So, we're gonna eat our own dog food, just to be clear, and continuing to perfect the process, the training, and the certification program so that it is not a burden on small business, and the small businesses who go through that process will gain an advantage. Now, we are not going to be disclosing what level you are when you're put on the website, because Ellen Lord and Katie Arrington has asked us not to disclose what contractor levels are. It's just that either you are or you're not.
Right. No, that's definitely a smart, I would say it's smart. That's a smart way to do it. So kind of, going back to, there's obviously a lot of questions about the certification process in the third-party certifiers that don't exist yet, and they haven't been announced. So no one's doing certification. So if anybody does hear that, then you're being misled. So talk about this world that we live in has changed in the last 6, 7, 8 weeks on the COVID stuff. Has there been any delays to the initial RFIs and the initial RFP process so that small businesses, like you said, there's not a ton of people who are going to be involved with these initial RFPs, but those that are preparing, again, small business focused on where do I go so I don't fall behind? What do I need to know? Is there any delays or any sort of timelines that you've heard from your end on how things move forward here?
We're not seeing any delays. We're doubling down. We're meeting all our mutually established milestones. So we're looking at later this summer beginning to initially focus on individuals who are going to be part of these auditors, 3 PAOs, and quality assurance, so that they can be ready to deal and support the 1,500 contractors that are in the upper echelon of DoD supplier base. So expect that to move forward. There may be some waivers offered for smaller businesses that perform task that does not require handling of CUI data so that you can participate in these programs as well. But that's not been fully flushed out. And the same thing with the COTS issue. You know, if you're a COTS supplier, you know, what is it that you have to go through? Is that software? If it's software, have you been FedRAMP certified? And at what level if you've been FedRAMP certified? So there is a major initiative ongoing right now in the CMMC board is to look at reciprocity between various related standards, including FedRAMP, which looks at, you know, the controls of computer software and the handling of classified information and COI data. So that is another piece of the puzzle that you might be interested in.
Right. Right. Okay. So a lot of questions here on, you know, obviously with our audience being mostly small businesses or maybe some contracting officers here that work with small businesses, part of the DoD supply chain. So can you talk a little bit about how the CMMC AB is going to partner and collaborate with, and you've touched on this a little bit, but, you know, other DIB communities, but also kind of where small businesses can go for resources if they feel, you know, I'm probably just going to be basic level one, I do a little bit of work or whatever, and how they can kind of start focusing on some of that stuff, you know, and then same thing for those that want to help, you know, whether they work with these, where can they go to find some more information just to not fall behind, I guess is what I think most of these questions are getting at, so that they can get a better understanding of this from a small business resource standpoint.
Well, a small business can easily download the current CMMC standard, you know, 1.02, download it and start reading it, and go to NIST website, and if you want to add to that, the 171 stuff, and you can see that they're very, very similar. So I would look at what has been defined as level 1 and 2, and, you know, what controls you need to be worried about, and begin to look at your own operation, and whether you're even doing business with DoD or not, you know, this is good cyber hygiene. I mean, if your business is selling straws, then I wouldn't worry about it. But if you're providing critical capabilities, especially in technology areas, whether it's weapon systems or software, you need to get your hygiene together regardless, because if you lose your IP, if you're breached significantly, the government might not want to do business with you at all, or other companies might not want to do business with you if you don't have good cyber hygiene. So I think this, you know, the world is all cyber today, and the threats against our state, our country, and the companies that are working in our government sector need to be aware that these are very aggressive, well-orchestrated threats against us and our infrastructure. And it's all of us have to do our part to protect, you know, our institutions, protect our freedoms, protect our data. So it's a good thing to do regardless. I'm also reading an anonymous attendee, and it says, if the manufacturer of the F-35 was unable to meet CMMC requirements, how does a small business? That's a pretty good one. I like that. Well, there is no CMMC audit yet, so they haven't been asked to meet that. What they were required is to meet the DFARS and the 171. And what this infers is that the self-certification that Lockheed did may have not been implemented or upgraded because they did a self-certification once, and maybe something changed or software became outdated or something. But this was a flaw in the whole process that resulted in the problem set that I discussed earlier, and why CMMC is now required, because the current approach did not work.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And I think that's why I'm, you know, early on I was kind of highlighting some of the verbiage just labeled on top of some of these levels, and managed always sticks out, right? So it's just like anything that you do in business. If you're effectively managing something, your risk of something going wrong significantly decreases. So there's a lot of solution, quote unquote, a lot of things out there saying they do everything, and you plug it in, you hit the easy button. We've all seen that commercial on TV, and you're good to go. Go live your life happily. Well, we know that that's just not the case when we live in the cyber warfare world like we do. And now all of a sudden you look how quickly something like COVID puts us at home, and now what kind of risks just got put back into place. It's the managed side of it, not just having a list of things that you said you did and et cetera. And I think you're right. I think there's a lot of situations like that. We don't hear about them in the news. It's not sexy to talk about small businesses, under attack and what happens there. So that's why I think the SBA and the organizations that you guys are aligning with when it comes to PTACs and stuff. And maybe that's I know there's a couple questions on here. The PTACs have been mentioned as a potential resource or somebody who's going to be involved here from a local resource. Can you provide, if there's any updated information on there, or kind of how that looks like that might be true or not true, and how that's going to go?
Let me see. I was answering one of the questions. Can you ask again? I was dual tasking.
Yeah, no, there, within the last couple of months, there's been a lot of focus on level 1 stuff, just because you have to get to basic before you can start getting good. So there's a lot of focus on small businesses that look for resources, and there's a question on here about how much is level 1 going to cost. I think that's a difficult question sometimes to answer, because it kind of depends on your current posture, but given that the level 1 requirements are pretty, I was just going to say, so we can get into that. A lot of the stuff doesn't cost a lot of money in the level 1 requirements, but the PTACs have been mentioned as a resource that small businesses can reach out to locally. Can you shed light on that or talk any more about what that's going to represent?
Yeah, so we're in the process of putting together those partnerships that will be delivering the training and the mentoring and the 3 PAOs, the auditors. So we're early in the stages right now. Those who want to get help from a third party might be best to do your own research, going to the NIST website around the 800 series, the DoD ANS website, the official CMMC website of DoD, and the CMMC AB, and do your own education. Get familiar with publicly available data, and avoid handing money to someone who's claiming that they're going to help you. They're going to help you give them money at this time. And so be aware of fake consultants that, that want to help you. They may not be helping you. They might be helping themselves. So you're going to see announcements on training programs that are going to be available through, webinars. We're going very fast in establishing those. It's part of my job. I've had 4 conference calls this week already with very viable, strong partners who already deliver training to their communities, and we're going to be empowering them to deliver CMMC training on our behalf. And the initial training will be a professional certification where you as an individual will be certified, not your corporation at this time, because this is the foundation before anybody, it's the first step. And obviously level 1 and 2 will be the focus of those initial training.
Right. Cool. Yeah. I know for the audience here, that's mostly going to be Twin Cities small businesses. I've got the Small Business Administration stuff at the bottom, and I'll put Christina and Sean's information up here in a second, but the Defense Alliance is also tied into those organizations. So they have a lot of resources around this region that could help you, depending on, all sorts of DoD contracting, not just on the cyber side. So there are resources available. This topic that we're talking about is obviously newer, so there's lots of information to drink through the fire hose. But I think, as John's pointing out here, there's a lot of places to go, do your research, just like you would for any other requirement on your shop floor or anything like that. Just do your homework and try to get ahead of it. Here's a good question. I know we've got about 10 minutes left. So this question came in, this kind of talks, I think, a little bit about how you do your contracting with subs and stuff. So it says small business. So this is coming from a small business. Once we become certified, and once that comes along, are you allowed to use subcontractors, that are not certified? Can we talk about, I know that's not information isn't fully released on that yet, but the thought process along that?
Well, we do expect initially that the large primes will they will be asked to help the small businesses deal with their COI data, and will probably be directed to take their certified facilities and opening them up to the subcontractors so that data can be managed within the prime. So that is our thinking at this time, even though that's not an official response, but that makes huge sense as a stopgap measure, is, you know, getting those 1,500 primes certified so that they can not only handle the data that their employees have, but also their subcontractors. So that is the intent that we are trying to move forward. These agreements are not finalized at this time, but that's the thinking that's going in place.
Cool, thank you. That's well said. I think that's what they were looking for. I've got two more questions I want to for sure get to here. I'm not 100% sure you're going to have official answers on either of these, but one specifically is around, I know it's difficult, but third-party auditors and who performs the assessments. Like, you know, how is that going to be paid? I don't know if this concern is coming from, is that going to come at the expense of the small business contractor or taxpayers, or how that's going to go?
So let's do a case study. Let's just see how a use case. Sorry. So you want to get certified. So the first thing that, and you think you're ready. So you first have to register to become certified. So there's a registration fee to go begin the certification process, like you would pay a registration fee to a university to enroll into a class. Then you will be responsible, depending on your level, to pay, and we will provide a list of auditors that have been set up, authorized to 3 PAOs to do it. You will pay them. And then we will then initiate a quality assurance review to make sure that that audit was complete. And then we will be issuing your certificate for whatever level that you've been done. But the contractor is responsible for paying this. The government has said that will be an allowable cost. So you can then charge back through your contract the cost of going through the certification. So I would say most, the lion's share of that cost through the 3 PAO has been identified by Katie Arrington as an allowable cost to pass on to the government through your contract.
Got it. Good one. Okay, that's I think that's a good way to put a case study. Sure. Or yeah, like you said, potential case of how that will go. That's awesome. Where was the other one here? Yeah, there's been talk about a marketplace and stuff when it goes to kind of what you just hit on, one of those steps. So when this becomes available and you want to, looks like, get on the list and sign up for some training as a small business, is that going to be something right through the as you see, through the AB website, or is that going to be something through other means and resources?
Yes and yes. So we will be, once you're registered on the website, we'll be letting everybody know when new training program comes out, but also you could be tracking things on LinkedIn and through various trade groups that you might be part of, AIA, MDIA, Professional Services Council, AFCEA, who will also be putting, and NASA, who are also putting out information about availability for training. So the most important thing is go log in there, put your name in there. That's the best first step. And then second step is now start going through the available materials posted on our website, DOD's official website, and NIST's website. So it's going to be a great skill to have as an individual. I think the CMMC individual certification for professional is going to be high value.
Awesome. Cool. No, that's good. And I didn't realize you were answering some of these questions while I was asking them, so sorry for the redundancy. But for those that are just on audio and not able to see the chat feature, those are good. Those are good answers. I think that's the deep dive that a lot of people are looking for. Okay, so we got 5 minutes left. I'm going to throw one more question out here. I'm going to try to find one that seems to pertain to the majority of the audience. think you covered that one. You covered that one. Okay, so this is one that comes up a lot. I think some of these questions might be stemming from maybe this is what they're thinking is. So let's say I am ready. I want to go. I go do the process that you just mentioned. That might be the case, and I get it, and I don't get my certificate because
You
some
failed.
of the examples you were using earlier, maybe, yeah, I failed because I forgot to look back at something.
And there's a couple options. You can bring in a consultant who might be one of those individuals that are certified to come in and help you fix that up. Then you'll have to take the test again or go through the second phase of the audit. Depending on, or if you fail, you can ask for adjudication. So we can see, well, whether the auditor properly assessed. And then we bring in our QA team and go, oh, no, you should have passed. That's fine. Here's your golden certificate.
Okay, so you'll have your...
You understand, this is early stages. The program is relatively new. So I would just, for all these questions, obviously a part of this is out of fear of the unknown or its impact, is, get registered on the website and take advantage of the information as it comes available and, go visit it every once in a while just to catch up. That's all.
Perfect. Cool. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to switch the slide over here and we'll wrap things up. So thank you, John, for joining. I know it kind of came up last minute as we had to fill in. So I know this is a lot of information for people to take on. It's always hard to tell between an audience of 60, 70 people how many know nothing and are trying to learn and how many people have been doing their due diligence over the last handful of years and are eager to show that they've bought into this DoD supply chain requirement and they want to keep getting business, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you for addressing some of these questions and for being a part of this. I've got Sean's information and Christina's information on these slides. I'm going to keep this up for another 2 minutes or so, and this will be part of the recording. So please direct questions back to Sean and Christina and any of those from the SADBOC event that we're doing this week, and they can reach out to John or myself, and if you have further questions, we'll figure that out later. But again, thank you, John. Thank you those for attending, and I hope everybody can...
information on those logos. Do you click on them to get it?
Yeah, I'll send them along with the recap when this gets sent back out, but they all have Sean and Christina's stuff from other events this week. Yep.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for participating in this session. Appreciate it. Bye.
Right. Thank you, John. Everybody stay healthy.